The Astoria Hotel doesn't just groan. Old buildings settle, they sigh, their wooden bones creak under the weight of a century. I know those sounds. I've built a life around them. They're the soft, rhythmic breathing of a sleeping giant. But the Astorian, it screams. It's a high, thin sound of shearing stress that you can't hear with your ears, but you feel it resonate deep in your bones, a constant, low-grade vibration of pure, structural protest. For the last 11 years at Sterling & Stone, my entire purpose has been to be the person who listens to those screams. My official title is Director of Heritage Conservation. In reality, I'm a building whisperer, a structural empath, the sole interpreter for these magnificent, silent structures that hold the very soul of New York City within their stone and steel. I am the guardian who prevents Gilded Age masterpieces from being gutted and turned into glass and chrome monstrosities. More importantly, my job is to keep them from collapsing into a pile of dust and regret. My name is Kyra Horton, and for the past 63 agonizing days, I've been locked in a silent war, trying desperately to stop our new CEO from killing the Astorian. His name is Liam Croft. He didn't rise from the world of architecture, engineering, or even real estate. He materialized from the sterile, bloodless ether of private equity, a place where history is nothing more than a number on a balance sheet to be depreciated to zero. He arrived with a slick smile and a mandate to streamline operations and maximize shareholder value, which is the universal corporate euphemism for gutting everything that gives a company its heart and soul. He doesn't walk through our historic, wood-paneled halls like a leader. He stalks them like a predator surveying a new hunting ground, his eyes constantly calculating, assessing, looking for weakness. He has a smile that never, ever reaches his eyes, which hold the cold, dead gleam of polished steel. In his first 2 months, he had already dissolved our independent survey team, a group of 3 of the most brilliant structural analysts in the country, calling them a redundant expense. He then accelerated every single construction timeline by 30%, brushing off safety protocols and due diligence as annoying, expensive speed bumps on his golden road to profit. My entire battle had been distilled into a single, comprehensive risk assessment report, 3 inches thick, sitting on my desk. It felt less like a report and more like the Astorian's last will and testament, a final plea before its execution. Inside its binders were the culmination of weeks of sleepless nights, geological surveys I had to commission in secret, structural integrity analyses, and century-old blueprints I had personally unearthed from the dusty, forgotten corners of the city archives, their paper so brittle it felt like handling dried leaves. The core of the problem was terrifyingly simple. The Astorian was built on reclaimed marshland, a common but risky practice in the 1920s. Its eastern foundation was its Achilles heel, a known vulnerability that my mentor and the company's founder, Marcus Sterling, had respected with an almost religious reverence for 50 years. But Liam Croft didn't respect history. He saw it as a teardown opportunity. His grand, visionary plan was to add a 5-story, all-glass penthouse to the top of the hotel, a glittering, obscenely heavy crown on a fragile 100-year-old neck. The final, damning piece of evidence, the nail in the coffin, was paid for out of my own savings. After Liam unceremoniously fired the internal survey team via a curt, company-wide email, I secretly hired Dr. Eris Thorne. He was a semi-retired but legendary geologist, a man who could read the story of the Earth in a single handful of soil. His report was unequivocal. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. The immense added weight of the penthouse, combined with the low-frequency vibrations from the new subway line being dug just 2 blocks away, would create a point of catastrophic failure within 10 years. 10 years was the absolute best-case scenario. A minor earthquake, the kind that rattles the city every few decades, could bring the entire structure down in seconds. Hundreds of lives, a designated historic landmark, all of it turned to dust and rubble for the sake of a few dozen multi-million-dollar apartments with a nice view. This morning was the day of reckoning. I was going to present my findings to the board. I walked into the 32nd floor boardroom, the report feeling like a lead weight in my briefcase. The room itself was Liam's vision personified. All glass, chrome, and minimalist furniture, a sterile box that deliberately erased any trace of the company's 50-year history. He sat at the head of the long, reflective table, not admiring the stunning, panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline, but staring intently at his phone, his thumb swiping with a dismissive speed that made my stomach churn. The other board members, men and women I had worked alongside for years, with whom I'd shared celebratory dinners and stressful deadlines, suddenly found the grain of the wood table or the clouds outside the window utterly fascinating. They avoided my eyes. They knew a storm was coming. They just hoped they had a good enough umbrella. I set up my presentation, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. My slides were clean, factual, and devoid of the passionate emotion I felt. I let the data speak for itself. I showed the original 1925 blueprints, zooming in on the architect's own elegant, handwritten notes of caution about the Eastern Foundation. I showed modern seismic activity charts for the region. I showed Dr. Thorne's simulations, a horrifying 3D model that depicted the building's support columns buckling, the floors pancaking in on themselves in a cloud of debris. I spoke calmly, my voice even, laying out a case so logical, so airtight, that to ignore it would be nothing short of an act of willful criminal negligence. I was on slide 17, the one summarizing catastrophic liability and potential manslaughter charges, when Liam finally looked up from his phone. He didn't look at me. He glanced at the screen, a flicker of profound annoyance crossing his perfectly curated face. "All right, I think we get it," he said, his voice a weapon of condescension. He waved a hand in the air, a lazy, arrogant gesture of papal dismissal. "Lots of charts, lots of scary words. Thank you, Kyra, we appreciate the thoroughness." I paused, my hand still holding the laser pointer, its red dot trembling slightly on the screen. "Liam, with all due respect, this isn't about scary words. It's about a quantifiable, imminent risk to human life and a potential corporate liability that would bankrupt this company. We are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in lawsuits before we even begin to discuss the human cost." He finally turned his full gaze on me. It was like being pinned by a shard of ice. He smiled that smile that wasn't a smile, the one that was all teeth and no warmth. "Kyra, I appreciate your passion for these old relics. I truly do. But your job is to preserve the aesthetic, to keep the dust off the history books so we can put them in the marketing brochures. You're not here to block progress. Your department is a line item, not a leadership committee." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. It was a pathetic, sycophantic sound. James Wright, the head of our legal department, a man whose career I had personally saved during an audit 5 years ago, suddenly found the ceiling absolutely fascinating. Margaret Chen, the CFO, was intensely studying her investment portfolio on her tablet, as if the fate of the Dow Jones was more pressing than the fate of a 1,000-ton building. I refused to back down. I held his gaze. "This isn't about nostalgia. This is about physics. The numbers don't lie. The foundation cannot support the load." Liam leaned back in his expensive leather chair, the picture of relaxed authority. He spread his hands wide, a gesture meant to placate a hysterical child. "Numbers can be interpreted, Kyra. They can be modeled to fit a narrative. What I need from my team are builders, visionaries, people who see opportunity, not obstacles. I don't have time for a glorified librarian who's trying to keep us from checking out the book." The room went utterly, profoundly silent. Glorified librarian. The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating, sucking all the oxygen from the room. It wasn't just a casual insult. It was a complete and utter annihilation of my profession, my expertise, my 11 years of devotion to this company. He hadn't just dismissed my data, he had dismissed my entire existence, reducing my life's work to the act of shushing people in a dusty room. In that crushing silence, a memory, sharp and painful, sliced through my composure. My father. He was a brilliant structural engineer, a man who believed buildings had souls, just like I do. He died on a construction site 30 years ago, crushed under a collapsing concrete slab because a developer, a man with Liam Croft's exact brand of arrogant ambition, had cut corners on the rebar to save a few $1,000s. My father's last words to my mother, spoken over the phone just an hour before he died, were about a hairline stress fracture in a support beam that no one, absolutely no one, would listen to him about. Strange, cold, and beautifully clear calm settled over me. The rage was there, a white-hot nova burning in my chest, but it was perfectly contained now, focused into a single diamond-hard point of purpose. This was no longer about convincing him. This was about destroying him. He had just handed me the moral justification for a war he didn't even know he was about to fight. I carefully, deliberately placed the laser pointer on the polished table. I took a slow, deep breath, then another. "You're right, Liam," I said. my voice quiet but carrying across the silent room with chilling clarity. Perhaps I've been looking at this from the wrong perspective entirely. I closed my laptop. The click of the latch echoed like a gunshot in the tomb-like room. I began to gather my papers, not with the hurried, fumbling motions of a defeated employee, but with the precise, methodical movements of a surgeon preparing her instruments for a delicate and life-altering operation. Liam, believing he had won, was already back on his phone, his victory so absolute in his mind that I had already ceased to exist. He had won the battle, he was sure of it. But I knew, with the unshakable certainty of a bedrock foundation, that I was going to make him lose everything. As I reached the door, I didn't look back. I could feel their eyes on my back, a mixture of pity, fear, and relief that it wasn't them. I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady. I scrolled to a contact saved under the simple name Pandora. The message I typed was only 6 words long. It's time to open the box. I hit send and walked out into the hallway, the heavy oak door closing behind me with a soft, final thud. The game had changed. I was no longer a conservator trying to save a building. I was a demolition expert, and I had just marked Liam Croft's entire world for a controlled, systematic, and utterly spectacular implosion. He just didn't know it yet. My office, which also doubled as the company's official archive, was my sanctuary. It was a space Liam Croft actively avoided, a subterranean library filled with the ghosts of blueprints and the smell of old paper and leather. He called it the morgue. I called it the heart of sterling and stone. It was here that Pandora's box lived, not as a mythical object, but as a fireproof, lead-lined safe hidden behind a false wall of 19th-century architectural renderings. I spun the heavy dial, the clicks echoing in the silent room, and pulled open the door. Inside wasn't just one report. It was my life's work. It was my insurance policy. It was the complete and unabridged history of Liam Croft's corruption. For 2 years, long before he was even named CEO, I had been tracking the rot. It started with small things. A contractor I trusted for a decade suddenly being replaced by a cheaper, less reputable firm on a mid-level project. Whispers of substituted materials. The quiet, forced retirement of Marcus Sterling's most loyal project managers. I started digging. I created a shadow archive, a parallel track of documentation that existed completely off the company's servers. Pandora's box contained everything. It had Marcus Sterling's original, handwritten notes on the Astorian, explicitly forbidding any additions to the roof. It had Dr. Thorne's full, unredacted geological survey. It had sworn affidavits from 3 of the structural analysts Liam had fired, detailing how he had ordered them to reevaluate their data to produce more favorable and completely fraudulent results. But the real weapon, the core of the plan, was the financial investigation. I had a cousin who works in forensic accounting. As a favor, she helped me trace the web. It turned out Liam wasn't just cutting corners to boost profits. He was actively sabotaging the company for personal gain. He had heavily invested in and was shorting the stock of several high-quality material suppliers. Simultaneously, he was awarding massive, no-bid contracts to a new, cheaper supplier, a shell corporation that, after 3 weeks of digging, we traced back to a holding company owned by his brother-in-law. He was forcing us to use inferior steel, substandard concrete, all while betting against the companies we should have been using. He wasn't just risking the Astorian's collapse, he was engineering it on a corporate level, planning to blame the failure on pre-existing conditions, while his family got rich off the contracts and he profited from the market manipulation. My revenge couldn't just be about stopping him. It had to be about exposing him so completely that he could never, ever do this to anyone or anything again. The plan had been dormant, a sleeping dragon awaiting its moment. His glorified librarian comment was the insult that woke the beast. The first step was the Trojan horse. I needed to make him believe he had won, that I had been utterly defeated and demoralized. The next morning, I submitted a formal request for a 6-week leave of absence, citing personal reasons and professional burnout. It was a move of calculated weakness, designed to appeal to his massive ego. As expected, it was approved within the hour. Liam probably imagined me at home, weeping into a pint of ice cream. The reality was starkly different. I was setting up a war room in my apartment, but before I left, I had to set the trap. I had to give him one last chance to choose the right path, not because I thought he would, but because I needed his choice on the record. I drafted a careful handover, email to Liam, and the entire project management team for the Astorian. It was meticulously professional. I outlined all pending tasks, and then, buried in the middle, was the key. I attached a 2-page memo titled Contingency Plan B, Foundation Reinforcement Options. It was a summary of a less invasive, but still expensive, method to shore up the eastern foundation before adding the penthouse. I wrote in the email, while this option would incur significant delays and an estimated 15% budget increase, it would mitigate all structural risks outlined in my recent presentation. I leave it to your discretion. I knew he would never choose it, but I needed to offer him the choice. I needed to show that the company had a clear, viable, safe alternative, and that he actively chose to ignore it. And the final, critical piece of the trap was the software I had my tech-savvy nephew install on the company's server months ago. It was a simple tracking program that would give me a time-stamped, verified digital receipt the moment that email was opened, and more importantly, the moment my Plan B attachment was deleted without being saved or forwarded. That digital receipt would be my proof of his willful negligence. I hit send, packed my personal effects from my office, and walked out of Sterling and Stone without looking back. For the next 3 weeks, as far as anyone at the company was concerned, Kyra Horton had vanished. The email receipt came through to my personal phone 2 hours later. Opened by Liam Croft. Attachment deleted 8 seconds after being opened. The bait was taken. The trap was sprung. Now it was time to assemble my team. I called them my Ghost Squad, a collection of people wronged by Liam, all of whom had an unshakable sense of integrity. First, I met with Dr. Eris Thorne at a quiet coffee shop downtown. He was a man in his late 60s with kind eyes that held a fire of intellectual fury. He was personally insulted that Liam had not only ignored his data but had tried to bury it. "He's not just a fool, Kyra," Eris said, stirring his tea with a steady hand. "He's a menace. A man who ignores the laws of physics will eventually be crushed by them. The only question is how many innocent people he takes with him. You have my full public support. I will testify anywhere, anytime." My next meeting was far more delicate. It was with Sarah Jenkins, Liam's personal assistant. She was young, barely 25, and perpetually terrified. I had seen the way Liam spoke to her, the casual cruelty, the way he made her feel small and incompetent. She was the one he would use to do his dirty work. I arranged to bump into her accidentally near her apartment building. She was jumpy, her eyes darting around as if expecting Liam to materialize from the shadows. I kept my voice soft. "Sarah, I'm not here to cause you trouble. I'm here to offer you a way out." She was defensive immediately. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I know he had you delete my email, the one with the Plan B memo," I said gently. "And I know that he's going to make you sign off on things, to initial paperwork that you know is wrong. He's making you an accessory, Sarah." "I'm offering you a chance to be a witness." Tears welled in her eyes. "He'll ruin me. He told me if I ever crossed him, I'd never work in this city again." "He's going to ruin himself," I replied, my voice firm but kind. "You just have to decide which side of the wreckage you want to be on. I can protect you, but you have to help me." I handed her a small box. Inside was a pin, a simple, elegant brooch in the shape of a dragonfly. "The eye is a camera," I explained. "It records high-definition video and audio. I just need one thing from you. The next time he asks you to do something unethical regarding the Astorian, I need you to wear this. I need you to ask him, just for clarification, to state exactly what he wants you to do. That's all." She stared at the dragonfly, her fear warring with a flicker of hope. I saw the moment she made her decision. It was the moment she realized she wasn't powerless. She nodded, slipping the box into her purse. The call came 10 days later. It was a panicked whisper from Sarah. "He did it. He made me forge the signature of the chief engineer on the final materials approval. The engineer quit this morning, but Liam needed the paperwork filed today to avoid a delay. He told me to do it. I have the recording." I felt a cold surge of victory. It was the final piece. The kill shot. The event was set. The topping out ceremony for the Astorian, the moment they would hoist the final steel beam into place, was scheduled in 1 week. It was a massive PR event. The mayor was scheduled to attend. The press, investors, the entire New York real estate world would be there. Liam had planned it as his coronation, the celebration of his genius. He had no idea it was going to be his execution. The night before the ceremony, my apartment was a true war room. The walls were covered in charts, timelines, and copies of incriminating documents. Dr. Eris Thorne's report sat in the center of the table like a holy text. The digital receipt of the deleted email was printed and framed. And on my laptop, I played the video from Sarah's dragonfly pin for the 5th time. The audio was crystal clear. Liam's voice, impatient and annoyed. "Just sign Peter's name. He's gone. Who's going to know? Just do it, Sarah. It's not a big deal." It was a very big deal. It was a federal crime. I looked at the gleaming, unfinished penthouse of the Astorian through my apartment window. Liam thought he was building a monument to himself. He had no idea. He wasn't just building a penthouse, he was building his own gallows. And tomorrow, at his own party, I was going to hand him the rope. The morning of the topping out ceremony was perfect. The sky was a sharp, cloudless blue, the kind of brilliant September day that makes you fall in love with New York all over again. It was a day for celebration, for new beginnings, or, in my case, for controlled demolitions. I chose my outfit carefully, not a suit of mourning, but a suit of armor, a sharply tailored, dark gray pantsuit that spoke of competence and authority. It was the uniform of an expert witness, not a librarian. I wasn't on the guest list, of course. Liam had personally seen to that, but I had my own key. I arrived not at the main entrance with the reporters and the investors, but at the private side entrance, where I was met by a familiar, stooped figure, Marcus Sterling, the founder, the soul of the company. I had called him 2 days prior and laid out the entire story, providing him with a full copy of Pandora's box. He was horrified, heartbroken, but most of all, he was furious. He had treated Liam like a son, and the boy had poisoned his legacy. His presence today was his penance and my ultimate validation. We walked into the lavish, open-air reception on the 20th floor terrace, and the buzz of conversation faltered. Heads turned. Whispers followed in our wake. Liam, holding a flute of champagne and schmoozing the mayor, saw us. For a fraction of a second, his mask of affable charm slipped. I saw pure, undiluted rage in his eyes, followed by a flicker of genuine fear. He quickly excused himself and strode over to us, his smile stretched so tight it looked painful. "Marcus, what a surprise," he said, his voice a low growl. "And Kyra, I thought you were on leave, enjoying your rest." "I'm feeling much better now, thank you," I said, my voice calm and even. "This is a private event," he hissed, his eyes darting around to make sure no one could overhear. Marcus Sterling, who rarely raised his voice, spoke with the quiet, unshakable gravity of a patriarch. "I founded this company, Liam. There is no part of it that is private from me. Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe your speech is about to begin." We took a position near the main stage, a place with a clear view of the massive LED screens that would be broadcasting the ceremony. Liam, shaken but ever the performer, walked to the podium. He launched into a soaring, self-congratulatory speech about vision, progress, and the bold future of Sterling and Stone. He painted himself as the savior of a stagnating company, a visionary dragging a relic into the 21st century. He was building a cathedral to his own hubris, and the entire city was invited to worship. "And now," he boomed, gesturing to the sky, "the moment that symbolizes our ascent, the final beam." As the crane began to lift the steel beam, adorned with an American flag, I nodded to a young tech in the crowd. He was the nephew who had installed my tracking software, and today he was my Trojan horse in the control booth. He pressed a single key on his laptop. Liam's smiling face on the giant screens behind him suddenly vanished, replaced by a terrifying, silent video. It was Dr. Thorne's 3D simulation of the Astorian collapsing. The room gasped. The elegant, animated structure shuddered, then pancaked in on itself in a cloud of digital dust. The words "catastrophic structural failure" appeared in bold, red letters. Liam froze, his mouth agape. "What is this? Shut this down. Technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen." But the image didn't go away. Instead, it was replaced by a clean, simple graphic, a screenshot of my email to him with the Plan B memo clearly visible. Next to it, the digital receipt popped up. OPENED, Liam Croft, 10:42 a.m. Attachment DELETED, Liam Croft, 10:42 a.m. 8 seconds after opening. I had a wireless microphone in my hand. I switched it on. My voice, calm and clear, cut through the panicked whispers. That was the safe option. The option to save this building and the lives of everyone who would have been inside it. Mr. Croft was given that option. He chose to delete it in 8 seconds. Liam was frantic now, gesturing wildly at the tech booth. "Security, get her out of here." "This is corporate slander. But it's one thing to ignore a warning," I continued, my voice rising slightly, "and it's another thing entirely to commit fraud." The screen changed again. This time, it was the video from Sarah's dragonfly pin. The camera was shaky, but the audio was perfectly, damnably clear. The entire audience heard Liam's voice, annoyed and impatient. "Just sign Peter's name. He's gone. Who's going to know? Just do it, Sarah. It's not a big deal." A collective, audible shock went through the crowd. Forgery, a federal crime. The mayor took a visible step away from the podium, as if Liam were radioactive. Investors were already on their phones, their faces pale. The reporters were in a frenzy, cameras flashing, microphones turning from the stage to me. Liam stood there, exposed, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He had built his entire career on a foundation of lies, and I had just pulled out the cornerstone. That's when Marcus Sterling calmly walked to the podium and took the microphone from Liam's limp hand. His voice boomed with righteous anger. "As the founder of this company, I am announcing the immediate and indefinite suspension of Liam Croft, pending a full federal investigation into criminal fraud, market manipulation, and reckless endangerment. All work on this project is halted, effective immediately. Security," he said, his voice dropping, "please escort Mr. Croft off the premises." Two uniformed officers who had been part of the mayor's security detail moved towards the stage. Liam stared at me, his eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. He looked like a cornered animal. This wasn't just the loss of a job, this was the complete and utter destruction of a man's life, broadcast live. He didn't say a word as they led him away, past the stunned faces of the people he had fooled, past the cameras documenting his downfall. He had built his own gallows, and the party he threw had become his own public hanging. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The story was the lead on every news channel that night. Sterling and Stone's stock plummeted, then stabilized after the board, led by Marcus, issued a statement promising full cooperation and a complete overhaul of corporate governance. Liam Croft was indicted on multiple federal charges. His brother-in-law's shell corporation was exposed, leading to a separate SEC investigation. The whole house of cards I had so carefully documented came tumbling down. Sarah, granted immunity for her testimony, became the prosecution's star witness. 3 weeks later, I sat in the same 30-second floorboard room where Liam had called me a librarian. This time, I sat at the head of the table, flanked by Marcus Sterling and the company's lawyers. They didn't offer me the CEO position. They knew I didn't want it. They offered me something far more meaningful. They created a new C-suite position, just for me, Chief Integrity and Preservation Officer. I would report directly to the board, and I would have absolute veto power over any project that I felt compromised the structural or ethical integrity of the company. It was everything my father would have wanted. It was the power to make sure no one ever had to die for a deadline again. My first act in my new role was to officially cancel the 5-story glass penthouse. Instead, I presented the board with a new plan for the Astorian's roof. A public rooftop garden and observatory, a green space gifted back to the city, engineered with lightweight materials that the building's foundation could easily support. A project built on healing, not hubris. They approved it unanimously. Last week I stood on that rooftop. The construction was just beginning, but the air already felt different. It was quiet, peaceful. For the first time in years, I stood there and felt the old building beneath my feet, and it wasn't screaming anymore. It was breathing. A deep, steady, contented sigh. My father lost his life because no one would listen. I had torn down a man's empire just to make sure one building was heard. Liam Croft called me a glorified librarian. He was right in a way. I don't build things, I preserve them. And in the end, it wasn't steel or glass or money that won. It was the truth, documented, preserved, and finally spoken aloud. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe too.